Welcome back to the Man Cave, everybody, for episode 76 of the ManTFup Podcast. I'm Kimmy B.
And Lenny.
I feel like I haven't seen you in forever, Len, but you know what? Sometimes they say absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Just one of those cases.
No, definitely not.
I think so.
I'm just kidding. But anyway, before we go any further, please remember to like, subscribe, share, and follow as you're watching this week's episode. Please feel free to drop your comments in real time below. That way you don't leave anything or miss anything. I'm excited to kind of dive into this. You know, we get a lot of our content for our combos from social media because that's just life in 2023. And I was scrolling the gram and something popped up, and it was a clip from, I'm assuming, a mom or, you know, a woman. And she's talking about little boys.
We're overdiagnosing little boys with behavioral problems and ADHD, and a lot of that has to do with forcing them into situations that are not good for them, meaning little boys have a lot of testosterone between the ages of 3 and 6, which means they need to run around a lot, and between learning they need to have a lot of physical activity, and we're making them sit in circle time, and we're restraining them in a way that's causing them to feel a great deal of stress with very high levels of cortisol, which makes them seem distractible, and then they're diagnosed as being problems in the classroom. And we're really failing little boys. It's not that there's something wrong with them, there's something wrong with the way we teach them.
And she's talking about the overdiagnosing of ADHD and behavioral issues, especially with younger boys, in our education system and things like that. And immediately when I thought of these little boys running around just being hyper, animated and active, I thought of you, Len, and I thought of your sons, because I just feel like, if anybody could kind of speak to this, it would be you. You're kind of like that. You go in a million different directions. We talk a lot, like as an adult, having ADD or ADHD. I think you have a lot of people that have gotten all the way through life without that diagnosis. And as it's become more prevalent amongst, children, a lot of adults have started self-reflecting and going, sounds like me. Like
this is one of those things where, history's been erased. That phrase that boys will be boys has merit in this situation, and that's a phrase that's been around forever. I mean, boys need to run around, they need to do stuff, and I think part of it generationally, like, Nick's millennial, 29, 28, maybe 29, and we had no phone to hand him when he was a kid, so we would get up and walk him around. If we went out to dinner, everybody would take turns walking him around. He was very active and very outside, and I think this generation now is getting their brain stimulated, but not their physical stimulation.
I think it's been going on for a couple of generations, though. I think you're going to see it towards the younger end of millennials. You're going to see it with Gen Z. You're definitely going to see it with Gen Alpha. We love a good diagnosis, and it's crazy because the first thing I do, I see a clip that I like, I usually send it to you, and then I immediately go to the comments. And the first comment that pops up is somebody that's saying, ADHD has nothing to do with needing to run around or get energy out. My kid can run around all day and still have ADHD. This gets diagnosed by an actual physician through a test that takes multiple hours. Posts like this piss me off as a parent who has a kid with ADHD and has had ADHD themselves. And I think that made a great point, because that wasn't what this post was about. It wasn't about minimizing or mitigating, you know what I'm saying, ADHD diagnosed. That wasn't what that person was trying to get at. She was talking a little bit about the testosterone levels of kids who were 3 to 6 and the need to, again, get out, be active. And then she said, when you don't allow them to do that, it builds up cortisol, which then makes them seem distracted. So there's obviously medical things happening here. But bigger than that is just, I think, people's obsession with a diagnosis, with an excuse or a reason or a logic behind a child who's maybe a little over the top sometimes, or who maybe needs a little bit more attention or activity than you have the bandwidth or time to give them, right? When we talk about education, and there's some great comments that we can get into from teachers discussing things, and they start going back and forth in the comments. So it was just a really interesting conversation because, again, absolutely zero medical expertise or knowledge.
No, these are opinions.
Sitting here. Completely opinion driven. I respect what this parent says. As somebody who has, again, been to many a career day, spent a lot of time with teachers, has tons of friends who are parents, and has also been in circles where we throw around the term ADHD. We throw it around all the time. People self-diagnose themselves and proclaim to have ADD, ADHD as adults, right?
We're in the era of blanket diagnosis.
Yes.
Which is, now it's just an excuse to act a certain way.
And literally this is what many of the comments under that particular parents. And it's not to say there is a very real diagnosis here. ADHD is a very real thing, and it can definitely impact people's lives. And there are, most children are diagnosed, before the age of 12. 6 seems to be the core age where you get the diagnosis. And there are adults who go, like Len, you said you actually went, and the testing took months. Like this is
it over a
process.
Long period of time.
And it's observation, and it's a lot of questioning, right?
Testing. There's a lot that's involved in it.
When you're getting a legitimate diagnosis.
When you're doing a real study about certain things. And ADD and ADHD are two different things, and people
don't differentiate.
Don't differentiate them.
They just add an extra letter.
And, ADD...
Attention deficit disorder.
Yes, can be, and this is semi-proven, can be, almost enticed in people. It can be caused. It can be caused by this.
Okay.
It can be caused by a lot of different things, because overstimulation will cause you to have that inability to concentrate.
Yeah.
ADHD is
attention deficit hyperactive, right?
Yes, that's a little bit different, and that's something that I think requires a much bigger diagnosis. And kids, boys in general, when they're little, don't sit still.
Well, to your point,
I'm 56 years old. 53. I wish I was 53. I'm 56, and I don't like to sit still.
Yeah.
It's just it.
Well, and like I said, there are adults who are now getting ADHD diagnosis. They're going through the test, and a lot of times they'll tell you they may call in your partner, they may call in family members that have had a lot of interaction with you as a part of that diagnosis process. So again, this isn't something where you just look at your kid and go, he's running around, and then walk into a classroom and say, hey, my kid has ADHD. But I think that we've gotten to that place, right? And I think that, there might even be some teachers who are guilty of that, or some people in administrative positions that are guilty of just labeling somebody who's got these certain characteristics as having an actual behavioral
and again,
situation.
With taking physical education out of schools, that's going to increase it, because there's no steam to blow off in that 7 or 8 hours that the kid is in school.
But also, to my point before, and to what you were saying about we're looking for these blanket diagnoses. I Googled ADHD diagnosis, and literally the first 4 things that popped up on my Google page are all sponsored posts. Same day ADHD assessment, get done. ADHD treatment today. Same day ADHD diagnosis, insurance accepted. Online ADHD care, take a short assessment. Symptoms and diagnosis of ADHD. And you're just like, this is not good. This is bad. And then I said, what's next? People ask, what are the main signs of hyperactivity and impulsive? Like, what are the main symptoms of ADHD? Hyperactivity and impulsiveness. Being unable to sit still, especially in calm or quiet surroundings. Constantly fidgeting. Being unable to concentrate on tasks. Excessive physical movement. Excessive talking. Being unable to wait their turn. Acting without thinking. Interrupting conversations. This is every 5-year-old at a glimpse that I've ever encountered, right? If I just want to look at this quick synopsis, you could diagnose 98% of humanity as having ADHD if you're looking at the internet. And that's what scares me about it. And I love that this woman took the time to just kind of break down and go back to the whole, boys will be boys, and they're being unfairly stigmatized in a classroom. And sometimes those types of, diagnosis or labeling can carry through their entire educational journey.
I
and that's
think there's
scary.
a lot of parents that want that to carry through, because they feel like they're getting special treatment for their children. It's being abused on the parental level
Yeah.
because the education system says, oh, well, little Johnny needs to have an extra 20 minutes to take the test. No, little Johnny needs to study an extra hour the night before.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so as long as you keep stretching out these things based on, you know, a blanket diagnosis.
Well, I want to,
Where's the benefit?
Well, and this is what somebody else commented right below that. Like, I'm going to say one thing as a teacher and now a principal. When parents begin to educate themselves about learning and to support their children from the minute they are born until the minute they enter schools, then you can expect changes. We teachers are being expected to work miracles with children who were raised in front of a screen and as a result have limited vocabulary skills and even less ability to sit and communicate with other real children and adults with no lights, beeps, and whistles, right? And then literally her hashtag was don't blame teachers for lack of good parenting. And I have to applaud this woman for actually saying this under a very public, you understand what I'm saying? Because in 2023, I already screenshotted it, and not to use against her, but if there's a parent.
Fuck 2023.
But you understand what I'm saying. Like that's a bold statement to make as somebody who is a teacher and now a principal of a school. Like to get on here.
Are you seeing more of that though? Are you seeing more of lately more people speaking out against, these stereotyping the kids and reaching back to, the home life? I mean, I know a few people who have babies right now, and I'm like, you need to get that kid in a fucking daycare. You need to get that kid in because, the daycare builds the immune system, builds the interaction in the real world.
Yeah.
And, a lot of these parents nowadays are scared and they're keeping their kid at home till he's 5 years old. But what are you teaching him?
Yeah.
Teaching him to watch
And
the
I
View?
mean, I come from such a different background and upbringing, and I've obviously discussed it multiple times on this podcast. I was having dinner with a very mixed bag of tricks the other day, and just coworkers and people who work in radio.
Yeah,
and
we're more the Flintstone generation.
And well, not even the Flintstone. No. But even just the difference between South Florida Latino. Speak for yourself, homie. You got a good 15 years on me. Don't call me a Flintstone person. But no, I'm talking about even just the independence with which I was allowed to grow up. And part of that was my mom was a single parent. We had a great support system in my extended family, but even they were going to summer camp when they were kids, right? And at a young age. I tried to sit at a table. The first time I went to summer camp, I was, I think, 4 or 5 years old. This was sleepaway camp. And the table literally almost passed out. Half of them were Latino, and they were like, and I love bringing that conversation up on the air in South Florida because people lose their minds. What? Summer camp, send your kid away. You're out of your mind. You're lucky if we send you to your tia's house or, down the street, your cousins. That's your summer camp. Figure it out in the backyard. And not saying that everybody should do it, but it was such a blessing to me. Literally at 5 and 6 years old, I was away for the summer. And it wasn't because my mother didn't want to raise me. It was that she worked. Around the country, she was like, and you're not going to sit at a babysitter's house, and you're not going to sit and be inside. You're going to go, you're going to swim, you're going to be at the lake, you're going to horseback ride, you're going to learn how to sail, you're going to learn how to do archery and riflery, you're going to socialize with other kids, you're going to network, because these were the things that she experienced
There's still
growing
a lot
up.
of parents that do that, except it's now, cost prohibited to most.
Well, but I mean, and sleepaway camp is not something that a lot of parents do. That's never been, I don't think.
I
and
know a
it's-
good amount that go to
Your kids are
camp.
privileged. You can't always look through your bubble.
My
And
kids are privileged.
no, I didn't have money. But again, that was something that my mother
I
afforded
went
me
to
because.
sleepaway camp, and I had a single mother.
Okay, Len, we could.
One time,
Can we
and
get
like it.
something up, Angeli? Put a graphic up, and let's see how many people actually went to sleepaway camp when they were kids. What I'm telling you is it doesn't really happen. And even the Y camps down here are usually day camps, and they're basketball and baseball. I was literally in cabins, in the woods, in the mountains, in New Hampshire, and we did fun stuff, whatever. But the point is, Lenny, I was 4 and 5. Literally my first sleepaway camp, I was 4. I don't think you were 4.
No.
But my mother had done it when she was a kid, and it was
I think I went when I was 8 or 9. They didn't want me back the next year.
I'm sure they didn't. I don't want you back on this couch, and you're grown sometimes. Jesus. But I'm grateful for that independence. And again, I think I was probably in daycare by the time my mom obviously went back to work. She had a job. I don't think she even took real actual maternity leave. You know what I mean? Just it was a different time. And did things happen? Yeah. Do you get your elbow pulled out of a socket? Like, do you fall down? Do you bump and... Of course you do. But that can happen at home with your grandmother. It can happen with a parent. Like, I don't know. But the thing with little boys, and I feel like we've gotten to this place where we're so... I don't know. The irony of it all, because, you know, I'm very pro-female. You know this. But I was happy to see that somebody was focusing on our young, you know, on our young men and saying they're not these problematic little gremlins that everybody...
Sure they are. They're a pain in the ass.
Kids in general are a pain in the ass. But what I'm saying is they don't all have mental disabilities and disorders.
No, it's
you know what I mean?
normal.
They don't need to be on pills, and like it's wild to me that that's the lane that parents would choose. And again, I'm not trying to minimize the young people who actually do have a legitimate...
There's a lot of pressure out there from the school system to control your kids. There's a lot of pressure that, oh, you know, little Johnny might have this. You need to put him on this.
I don't think it's... No. I don't think parents want... I don't think teachers... I'm reading these comments. Teachers don't want to diagnose kids with this shit. They want... But parents enjoy it. Parents like coming in and telling the teacher, hey, my kid runs around like a madman because he's got ADHD.
Teachers don't want to diagnose it, but they want you to find out what's going on. If there's something going on. Is there something going on at home? Is, you know, little Johnny's distracted. What do you think it is? The teacher... Any teacher that... is engaged with her student.
So that's not a problem.
No, that's not the problem. The problem is that they push the meds on the kids automatically. That's the problem.
Schools are pushing the meds on kids?
No, doctors.
Okay.
You know,
well, then let's clarify, because it sounded like yes.
But it all starts with little Johnny having a problem at school, talking to the parent. The parent says, okay, I'll take him and get him checked. And the doctor goes, you know, sit in that chair, Johnny. And 3 minutes later, the doctor's like, well, he can't sit still. He's obviously ADHD.
I mean...
Let's put him on Ritalin.
No,
Let's put him on...
And I agree, but I think that there's a twofold thing happening here. And you're making it sound like teachers want kids just to sit in their chairs and be good and study. And I'm sure there are some, especially, and I'll tell you what, I think it was more when I was in school that you had teachers that expected that, right? Like, sit there, learn the lesson, let's do this. And I think we're getting to a place now where people are having more of those conversations about how children learn best. And I'm just going off the comments that I'm seeing here. Like, you have teachers that are in the comments, you know, that are frustrated because they feel like they are handcuffed in the ways in which they can engage children and teach children. And you have teachers, because we know more now, going, kids don't all learn the same. Some children, you know, it's better to be able to take them outside and
teachers
teach them.
Are handcuffed across the board. You can't discipline a child. You can't do anything to someone else's child as a teacher anymore.
Yeah, but what I'm saying to you is, like, I think you have these people that are watching this particular video saying, you know, I understand the dynamic of young children, and as a kindergarten teacher, and this is really for, you know, obviously the teachers that are teaching, because at some point you do need structure, and at some point you do need to learn how to come in and focus in on a task and get it done. But in pre-K and kindergarten and first and second and third grade, which is when you're learning the fundamentals, right? But you're also dealing with testosterone, and you're dealing with, you know, hormone and all of these things that happen in little children. You know, I think reevaluating how we approach learning is so important. And that's the positive takeaway from me, is that it seems like we have a good part of the community that is looking at it going, something's got to give. We've got to figure something out.
Yeah, the education system's broken.
It's not, but that has nothing to do with diagnosing kids with ADHD. Like, you're sitting.
But it does, because you're trying to put a square peg in a round hole. The frustration of the teachers, is that they can't do individual teaching for little Johnny.
But you know why they can't do that, though? Because parents don't have the balls to step up and say, hey, no, my kid doesn't have ADHD. Maybe if you took him outside a little bit. Like, no. Again, you've got people here saying, I agree with I agree. We're in agreement, and nobody wants to buck the system. So I'm not going to say the entire education system is broken, because when you say that, to me, it makes it sound like every teacher is on board with the bullshit. And they're not. You have people that genuinely are getting into...
I think more of the teachers are not on board with it, but it's their job and
But they need
their hands are
parents to
tied.
back them up. You need parents to back them up. So I'm going to say more of
Parents are
this.
pussies.
That's the point, Len. In this particular situation, I want to put more of the focus on parents. You coming to your PTA meetings, when you're voting for, school board members and things like that, when you have town halls and the ability to come and actually address your issues with public education in your community, these are all things we have control over. These are all things that we have the ability to actually change as a community, but you've got to be present and you've got to show up. And, you've mentioned it multiple times sitting here today, that people just want an excuse. They want to be able to pull their hands off the situation and point and blame. And that always that is a fundamental problem every single week on this podcast, that we can come back to, is that people want to bitch and point the finger. And then when it comes to what are you doing? It's like, well, I bitched and I pointed the finger. And it's like, nah, man the fuck up. Go to your school board meetings. Sit down with your teachers. Like, they have parent-teacher conferences. You know how many parents? They're literally doing rock, paper, scissors over which parents gotta go. Mm-hmm. Right? Because I get it. People are tired. You work. In Florida, you sit in traffic, and that's gotten even worse. So now it's like you're trying to figure out how to get out of your job, right? Get to the school, be present. You're worried about 1,000 other things. But guess what? You decided to have kids, and this is a part of it. And that's one thing that I can say. My mom worked her ass off, but if she couldn't be at a PTA meeting, my grandmother was there. And God, I did not want my grandma to go to those things. I did not want my grandma to go to those things. Because let me tell you something. If she did not get a glowing report from every teacher on the docket.
You had a problem.
What? I went from private school to public school in the 3rd grade. And my private school had it was called a PACE system. So you kind of taught yourself. But it was very cool. So in English and in history and in all of these really comprehensive subjects, I was at an 8th grade level, literally. Mathematics, which is building blocks, right? Not so much I was good. I knew my times. I knew all of those things. But it wasn't like in public school where they drill it into you. Do you remember in public school, you get 60 seconds and how many problems could you solve? In math, it'd be a times table, it'd be your 6s, it'd be your 2s or whatever, and they teach you little songs. I didn't learn that in private school. Could I do a basic? Of course I could. When we were onto algebra and all these things, but I couldn't kick everybody's ass in a times table. And my 3rd grade teacher, 2 weeks in, tells my grandmother, first of all, I also had a conduct issue. I talked a lot. Shocker, I know. But she was
clearly had ADHD.
Clearly. Why didn't they give me pills? So no, she was like, she's underperforming in math. My grandmother came home. Honey, promise you the next time we have one of those stupid, how many can you do 60-second ones? First one done, entire paper, boom, not a problem, wrong. My grandma didn't play. And it wasn't that I couldn't do it. I just didn't learn. But to the point of this conversation, that was not how I was learning prior to that, right? And so now you get into the public education system and you have to flip some things. But imagine I was in a school where they didn't address that, or I didn't have a parent that showed up and they just allowed me to continue to underperform, right? Because I wasn't learning the way that they were teaching. Little do they know, I'm reading at an 8th and 9th grade level in the 3rd grade. I used to get so annoyed they would do the group reading shit. You know what I mean? And every kid has to read a paragraph. And I'd be like this, so hurry, under my breath, hurry up. Or they'd be like, does anybody want to read? I'd be like, me. And they'd be like, Kim, you have to slow down. You can't, that's not fair to other people. I would get so frustrated with the kids who couldn't read well. Sorry, I know that sounds judgy. But again, it's all in how you learn, right? So parents that are engaged and are willing to show up and be a factor in changing the system that they keep bitching about being broken are so important. And I know, Len, your response to that was you pulled you made sure your kids went to a school where you fully supported the way that they learn.
That's my choice.
Yeah, and you're able to do that.
Even if they went to public school, and even if you went, public schools are very difficult. Even if you vote for your board, you do this, you do that, they're still bound by rules that the state puts on them with the standardized testing and all of this, or you don't get money. It's they're putting the...
But again, these are all people that you elected.
They're stacking the cards against... This is a long time. The standardized testing's been...
But we also have a state where our governor gets to elect who's on his board of education. So then he basically pushes through whatever agenda.
Yeah, but again, we can't elect our candidates based on one subject.
Education is a pretty important one, though.
But yes, it is, which is why it belongs to like the state and not the governor. This is something that needs to be taken out of the hands of the governor and put in the hands of.
But this is my point. So after seeing all of this, I don't think a lot of parents necessarily understand. If you're happy with the system, you're not digging too deep into who's making the decisions, right? Now, when your feathers get a little ruffled, now you start to look, and we've realized. I think I've learned so much more about how the Florida education system works over the past few years. And I think that's true probably in a lot of states, especially post-COVID, right? Because there were a lot of people that were going through the motions because they were maybe happy with how things were in their particular area. And then the mask mandates came down and school closings and, at-home learning versus like all of these things happened. And you had people who felt very, very differently. And, we look at a lot of these educational topics from, again, like you said, our Flintstone kind of vantage point. It's so different though now, Len. Like, it's scary. I didn't realize how detrimental those COVID years were to children until probably, I would say, like the last year or so.
Yeah, because it's only been a year since it's over.
Well, no, but in Florida, we were different.
Schools were still closed during COVID.
Schools opened the next year. They were back.
They were almost 2 years closed, I think. And the second year was optional. So the optional, people tend to take the lazy option, which is home. But besides the point, yes, I've seen teachers online that are complaining that the kids are coming in, 3 years behind.
And I'm not even talking about I'm talking about socially. I'm talking about the way that they carry themselves. Like, I told you I did an event with an organization that I've worked with for years. And basically these kids come in right before they get to go back to school shopping. $300 a piece. They get to go ham. They've got celebrity shoppers there. I'm kind of trying to paint a picture because when I first started doing this event, these kids would be so hype when they came in. The age group hasn't changed. And every year for the past 2 years, it's like they come in more and more disconnected, right? Like they don't care. They've got their headphones on. They're buried in their phones. They're not really communicating with each other. Doesn't matter if it's 8 o'clock in the morning or if it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So I can't blame it on being tired, and I can't blame it on, being hungry. We feed them, all of these things. It's just their level of engagement and connection is noticeably different than just a couple of years ago. And I mentioned it to the people that are over. He said, Kim, literally, and this is, they have a poetry network and all of these things. He was like, COVID fucked these kids up. And if you don't have children, and my mom lived with me, so I had companionship. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then I was working every single day in my radio station, so I was seeing people. So I didn't feel that human disconnect the way a lot of other people did, and I certainly didn't experience it the way children would. And because I was very cautious about where I went, I was still able to see family members that had kids. You know what I mean? Like, we were all having those conversations. But it makes me sad, and I can only imagine this getting even worse. This particular conversation that we're having today with little boys and possibly even little girls just being disconnected or seeming distracted or not being able to focus.
I think it's going to depend on the age level that the child was at when they went through.
But to your point, you have parents that are no longer putting their kids in the pre-K, in the you understand what I'm saying? Right. Like, so that socialization element that even to your earlier point used to happen around 2, 3, 3, 4, that pre-K time, Montessori. Again, I was out the house.
Listen, my kids, as good as they are still, I have to push them in social situations to speak with people and verbalize, even though they're very good compared to some other kids. I still have to push them. I'm like, you don't ask, you don't get. You got to, walk up there and ask.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of kids nowadays are just so used to the conveniences of not having to interact with people that they don't want to interact with people. And it's like, they have their own little bubble and they don't want to talk outside it. I mean, there was a 15-year-old kid at the show and Joey was there and I introduced them and Joey and him could have hung out. They were both bored out of their fucking mind, But neither one of them was willing to, make that, the little, hey, what's up? Hey, what's up? And that's it. Then they could have walked around the show together. They could have done 15-year-old boy things, whatever. No,
but
neither of them.
Instagram.
Neither of them.
On the phone.
Yeah, neither of them. This was at the
car show.
Exotic.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. I just think that there's a lot of kind of building momentum to these particular conversations. And it just kind of felt like it was a full circle moment for the podcast, just because it's so many things that we've talked about. We've talked about the over-diagnosing and over-prescribing of, Americans across the board. Mm-hmm. And when it starts when they're 3 and 4, that's they're
used to it.
That's very scary, right? And you're medicating children for the rest of their life, and that's just because then you become, your body either builds up a tolerance, you become dependent on it, or you even think that there's something wrong with you. I don't know.
Money in the cure.
But even beyond that though, like as a parent, to me, last resort would be putting my kid on something that they had to take in perpetuity, right? Like, you're a whole ass adult. Like, we have this conversation all the time. I don't want to take, but I get debilitating migraines, and people say, well, do you take medication? No, I don't want to. I listen to the commercials. If you get 20 to 25, I don't. I don't, thank God. When I get them, they're 72 hours sometimes, and they're horrifying. I wouldn't wish them on my worst enemy, but I don't want to be dependent on a medication. I remember my mom, who is 72, going to be 73, I think, or going to be 70. She is so mad at me. I told you, I'm like, just tell people you're 80. I got mad because they put her on, I think, a blood pressure medication. And she resisted for a very long time, and it has actually helped, you know what I mean, monumentally. But like, even her and I have that conversation. She doesn't want to be on the cholesterol and all of these different things. I'm like, absolutely not. For what? And I mean, and she's already in her 70s. So she's been a vitamin person, just a healthy eater, things like that her whole life. Blood pressure can be weird sometimes, especially as you get older. But, we have those conversations. It's like, if you don't have to, don't take stuff. Like my grandmother, same way. Like the end of her life, she lived to be, I think, in her mid-90s. She was on Parkinson's meds because she was early, like she had early stage Parkinson's. But outside of that, and that was wild, like hallucinations and just crazy shit. But other than that, not a medication person. She'd be like, oh, kiss my ass. I'm not taking your shit. Like, that was just, she also didn't like to go to the doctor. Like, she's that generation, like, meh, I feel great. I'm not going. So I don't know, like that, it scares me to see things like this, and then to, you do a little bit more investigating, and you see these astronomical numbers to which children are being diagnosed, and overwhelmingly it is little boys.
Society today is not teaching coping skills, it's teaching excuses and finger pointing. That's what's teaching, all of it. The whole, just forget about just the ADHD stuff. Everything has a reason, and it's caused by somebody else. It's this, it's that. It's
and also being active doesn't make you a problematic child. Like, that's the other part of this. Like, to the parents that have children who are diagnosed with, ADD, ADHD, or just, hyperactive, any of those things, obviously, again, in no way minimizing that, and especially to those of you that have taken all of the proper steps and gone to the multiple doctors and all of those things. But there shouldn't be a stigma attached to that either. Do you know what I mean? And we're really quick to like label it in that way. Like the guy who is, I don't want to say, but like is unreliable. Oh, him, he's got ADD. You know what I'm saying? And it's like,
or the person who's consistently late, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, right. But again, and we tend to do it to men in particular, right? When it comes to these types of diagnoses. And then it gets this negative connotation to it. And it's like somebody in the comments of that post said, people with these quote unquote disorders thrived at a different period in time, right? The people that didn't need, like if you want to go back to like the 60s, when you needed to farm land and be up before the sun, and you needed to have high levels of energy to actually be productive. You know what I'm saying? These are the people who were winning. Like, these are the people who had successful harvests. These are the people who had, thriving farms and things like that, or were incredible builders, or,
I think there's a lot of successful people.
Even academics, of course.
That have that.
But there's
issue.
still a negative connotation that comes with it. Like, you have a lot of people that don't like to discuss anything that has to do with mental health, right? Or behavioral issues. And when you're young, though, and it becomes something that you now have to communicate with teachers or with leadership, as a parent, I would feel a little bit concerned about that, especially if I had a son, because I feel like the chips are already stacked against them, right? Like when they come in and you say, "Hey, by the way, here's the diet." I'm not talking about the people that just want to, again, use it as a blanket excuse. I'm talking about the people that have really gone, the lengths, and they come in, and now you have a teacher that's like, anytime this kid has a moment,
again, it's coping skills. You have to teach. You can even teach a 3, 4, 5-year-old how to deal with those things. They have to become aware of their actions.
Well, yeah.
And then they have to have tools to work on those actions.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about just letting
similar
children
to the cold shower thing for a teenager.
I'm not talking about
same thing. It's a tool.
Just letting them run amok either. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying it should be
no. They have to be taught coping skills. They have to be taught that you have to sit and, it's maybe you shorten the classes to 15-minute blocks and take a 5-minute break and then another 15-minute block. Who knows what the answers are? But I think that's where our education system needs to go, based on the fact that people have a fucking 20-second attention span right now.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of it, but the coping skills have to be taught across the board.
Well, and I think
I think it's the same with feelings.
And again, we have to stop limiting people based on situations like this, because before we knew, people just had to work with it and make it happen, right? Like that just is how it went. It's like even children who are diagnosed on the spectrum, many of them are ridiculously high performing. You know what I mean? And border genius in many cases, prodigies in music and art and things like that. So it's like, instead of looking at things as a negative and then holding it against somebody, especially in education and in learning and in creative, it's how do we figure out, again, a way to use it to their advantage. If you find, it's like people who are dyslexic. Once you identify the problem, they learn
turn the book upside down.
but they learn at an incredibly effective level, right? Like but it's identifying the problem. So if the problem is education as a whole, if the problem is how we're teaching people, if the problem is that we don't have, the time to actually truly assess, and I'm not talking about a child's potential, I'm talking about how they actually learn best, right? That to me is the biggest failure of the education system in this country, is not allotting teachers and our schools the time to assess how individual children learn best.
Visually, auditory.
And trying to put them all under one blanket, because that's not how it goes. It's the reason why we can have dropouts that go on to become massively successful entrepreneurs, people who leave college and start the biggest tech firms on the planet and change society and culture forever, right? Like, so again, if you had found a way to educate them and keep them engaged, it's like so many kids that underperform are actually just bored, right? And if you don't have the finances to take your kid out and put them in a school that takes the time to do that, like, that shouldn't be against a child, but whatever. I apologize for getting sidetracked. So I know a lot of our conversations come back to education. This one kind of touched on education and mental health and a lot of other things. And parenting.
Parents manning up.
Yeah, everybody though. But again, I would like to see more teachers like the ones on this post, and I hope that we can share it maybe in our Insta story. I just think the comments are so invaluable on a lot of the things that we see on Instagram and TikTok and, what's the other one?
I think the comments are more real.
They are. Well, not that, and it gives you, it shows you so many things, Lenny. It shows how people can misinterpret, or how people can interpret differently the same thing that you just saw and read or received in one way, and they take it in a completely different manner. It goes to show you how we're coming at things and how important perspective and personal life experiences when we're, receiving any sort of information. And then I love to see the conversations and where people are at and who agrees and who different and how people engage with one another. But seeing the teachers comfortable and confident enough, and they do it on our posts a lot. Like, I love seeing the teachers get engaged and talk about their experiences, because they're the ones that are on the front lines. It's like you can sit here and talk about what's going on, you know, in a war zone, but if you've never served and you haven't been there, what do you really know?
Yeah.
Right? It's like I'd rather hear it from the people that are on the front lines of the battle. So the teachers, the principals, parents who are highly engaged, parents who are active and trying to positively change, you know, the system. But again, it does need changes. It does need changes, and we have an election coming up, and I don't know what that looks like, but I think that education should be something that is on everybody's radar.
Yeah,
when
it'd
voting.
be nice, but it's probably not going to be. And, you know, and truthfully,
But
I don't think the governor gives two fucks, no matter which one it
you're
is.
the governor, but Lenny, and we will wrap because I'm not going to go down this whole rabbit hole. But when you think about it, and it's something that you love to point out, right? When our education system is serving, right, and is doing what it's supposed to do, we had a highly effective middle class
Yeah,
in this country. And as the education system has declined and started failing, we've seen the disparity between those who have the 1%, you know, and the middle class, which has now become really upper lower class for the most part, right, and whatever, just get bigger. The wealth gap just continues to get larger and larger, and the American dream erodes more and more and more. And it's like we keep talking about it, but it's like the writing's on the wall.
Yeah, but it's 50 years in the making. Do you think you're going to change it? Do you think
you have to take the steps though to right the ship, like to, you know what I mean? And yes, you can do. We know it though, like we're watching it, and the one reason why I think we can is because no matter how divided most of us get, the one thing that can usually bring folks back together, and I don't know if it still can, is the competitive nature of Americans. We love to be the best, right? Like we love to be the top of the list, and we are not in many ways anymore. And with education, we're not even close to the top of the list. And we talk a lot about these incredible institutions of higher learning that we have. But if you go to those campuses and you look around, there's a lot of foreign students there. You know what I mean? There's a lot of students that are coming here to take advantage of this incredible, you know, level of education that we can provide, we're equipped to provide, but how many of our students are getting in and are competing at that level, right? And even when we talk about, you know, the Asian community, which has come and is not that far removed from many of their, you know, immigrant parents, but how they've maintained that passion and that focus on education in their communities as a whole, like, you know, being smart is at the top of their list, right?
Yes.
Like, and it's not but it's being successful, it's being smart, it's being the best, right? It's there's a lot of things there, and I feel like that's inherently also an American trait. Like we liked bragging rights. I don't know what happened to that. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what we're bragging on now that we got the most Bitcoin billionaires. I don't know. Like
bragging rights in sports is really, I think.
Well, no, I mean, but even the uber wealthy, the uber smart, the uber elite have always loved bragging rights about sports. It's why Harvard has athletic programs. They're not the most. They want to beat Yale and Princeton. They want to beat the other Ivies, right? Like it's a great day when that happens. But so I'm not mad. I like sports and bragging rights, but even that, like we're good at the sports that we have here. Football, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Soccer.
Formula One.
We get our fucking ass handed to us. We're certainly not winning in Formula One. You know what I'm saying? Like, we can host a good event though. But no, I'm just saying. Like, I think that's one of those things where people want their kids to be the best of the best. Like, we like accomplishments. We like accolades. We want NASA to be. I know I do, at least. And I don't know. Maybe I'm a dying breed. I don't know.
How can you want that if everyone gets it?
What do you mean?
How can you aspire to be the best at something if everybody else gets a trophy too?
Okay, I understand that. But
you know, it's that you're. It seems like, oh, it's fair for little Johnny, but what it's doing is eroding the whole system. It's eroding that drive that Americans had to be the best. Because I don't have to be the best. I'm going to get a trophy anyway.
I also think that part of that is evolution. And as with everything, medicine, academics, everything evolves. And you have to stay, and we do get stagnant. You know what I mean? Like, we're teaching people the same way we were teaching people
Listen, second place hasn't evolved. It's still first
I get
place
that, but
loser.
I get it, but then I don't understand
Just
how
because you get a trophy doesn't mean you're a winner.
Okay, but I'm sitting here talking about wanting bragging rights. I'm certainly not a everybody gets a participation trophy thing, and I'm not totally sure how that affects education. Like,
no, it affects society overall. You know, if I wanted to be the best at something, I did it to be a winner. Kids nowadays don't see that because they're winners automatically.
I mean, your
just
letter
for
grade
participating, I'm a winner.
Your letter grade is to you still get an A, B, C, D, F. You still get those things. So I mean, I don't know how you get a D is a D is a D. Oh, I showed up for class again. You sucked. I don't know how you feel just you know what I mean. I don't know where that one was going, but yes, I know Lenny.
What do you call a medical student with a C average?
A doctor.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, but that, I mean...
It's the same thing. It's, I mean...
Is that really the same thing?
It's sort of the same thing.
I don't know, because he could be an incredible surgeon, though. I mean, that doesn't mean...
Could be. It could be a horrible student.
This is weird. This conversation, you lost me. You lost me with this part of the conversation. But anyway, listen, that's episode 76. We'll try to get that clip up, or at least, some of the comments. But I thought it was good. Thank you for indulging me. But again, is it bad that I thought of you when I saw problematic boys and ADHD? And I was like, oh, Len can relate to this
I wear
topic.
that like a fucking badge.
There you go. See, and there it is. I love it.
Listen, if I can overcome it, anybody can.
Yeah. Do you have it?
What?
Did you get diagnosed?
With ADHD? Mm-hmm. I don't know.
You went through the test. You tapped out of the program?
No. I didn't go to the test for me, for one. But it's, if it was classic symptoms, I would think I had it. I mean, I have to keep stuff going. I have to stay. My brain just rolls through shit all day long. And I could sit here and have a conversation with you, and 5 minutes later, I'm going to be on to something else. Mm-hmm. And
he's going to go build a boat.
That's it.
Literally. He does that sometimes. But anyway, drop your comments. Would love to hear from any of the teachers that are watching, parents, if you have children that have been diagnosed with ADHD and you have feelings about this or some insight that you can share, please feel free. Maybe we'll have you on one of these fabulous podcasts. If you're a doctor and watching and you have a little bit more insight as to what's going on with the young people in America as far as this particular topic is concerned, would love to hear from you too. And we will be back next time with another episode of the ManTFup Podcast. Like, subscribe, share, follow. Boom! 45 minutes. We'll talk to you next time.
Peace.